So what we have here is an actual men's t-shirt marker. So before you actually start with the pattern and cutting it out, you need to do a marker, which is a whole sheet of paper and the fabric down the bottom. So you need to trace out a front. This is the men's t-shirt that you're going to be working on, and this is the back. So it's a full pattern. And then we have a sleeve, a left and a right. So you need to make sure that you flip your pattern so they do match to the actual garment. And there's also ribbing, but ribbing is separate to the t-shirt. It's very important that you do a marker before you cut on jersey, because jersey moves. So you should actually do this technique for most of your garments and testing and toiling. It's thorough, it's on grain, it doesn't move, and as you can see with the jersey, it does roll, which is fine. That's the fabric. So first of all, what you need to do is do a marker, a front, back, and a sleeve, a left and a right. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here as well, these are our digitized patterns printed at 100% full scale. This is the menswear patterns. Everything is online. And these are the leggings that also you'll be cutting out later, and what you'll be actually tracing out. So, but what I want to point out with these digitized patterns, with the men's one, it is cut on fold and cut on fold at the center back. As you can see from previously with my marker with the patterns, you need to have a full pattern piece for your front and the back. So my suggestion will be, the best thing to do is actually print these out, which you can at Officeworks, and I will let you know more information where you can else get it done, but you need to make sure they are full scale. Put them on cardboard, but make sure that the front and the back is a full pattern piece. This is a great resource for you to have for years to come. I will place it on cardboard, but just wanted to point out the digitized patterns, which I'm going to send through as well, that the front and the back needs to be, it is cut on fold, but you need to have it in a full pattern piece. With your leggings, this is the digitized version as well, which is everything online. So basically you're going to cut one pair. I will show you later how to cut the leggings and also how to prepare a marker. So once you've actually completed your marker, pinned it down to the fabric and cut out, these are the pattern pieces that you need to have. This is the back, the front, the two sleeves, so a pair, a left and a right. And this is ribbing. So ribbing, I've just done it in a contrast fabric. So once I show you how to stitch that around into the neckline, you'll be able to see it more than black on black. So that's the ribbing, which is just a one piece pattern which goes around the neckline. So now what I'm going to show you is how to make a t-shirt step by step. Now that you've cut out, now you need to print the front and the back at the shoulder seams, as you can see, and also I'm going to be placing cotton tape into the shoulder seams to prevent the seams from stretching. So we're going to do that at the same time at the 4-thread overlocker. For those of you who don't have an overlocker, what you can do is obviously straight stitch your seam with a ballpoint needle. And then for the seam finish, you can just use a zigzag machine on your domestic. So it's the same process. Just bear in mind when you are on your domestic that when you are stitching the seam, when you're pulling the actual shoulder seam or any part of the garment, if the actual thread breaks, you just need, that's got to do with your tension. So be aware of that. So I'm going to now feed this, place that right near the shoulder seam. 4-thread overlocker. That's all you need for any stretch jerseys, lycra. Everything is with a 4-thread overlocker. As you can see, I've allowed the cotton tape slightly longer because you can always cut it to length when you finish. So right sides together. Please make sure that when you are at the overlocker or at your machine, take away the pins so the pins don't break the blade nor the needle. Okay, the machine is so loud. Okay, so prevent it from moving. Just holding your cotton tape. As you can see, I'm not pulling the fabric. I'm just feeding it through all the way across to the other side. Keep going. What you need to do is you cut that in place. I'll take the pins out so you can actually see on the shoulder seam that the cotton tape is placed on the front of the garment, and when you actually press your t-shirt, as you know, all the seams go towards the back of the garment. So when you do one side, you do the other side. So I'll just grab the other cotton tape. I'm going to do exactly the same. Right sides together. And you're only slightly what's called skimming the edge. So you feed that through. Let the overlocker run. Take your pins out. Shoulder seams. And there you go. So that's the first step. You need to stabilize your shoulder seams, place cotton tape. You can also place clear rubber, clear elastic. You can also place in there fusing, very fine fusing as well. That will prevent from the seam from stretching. Okay, so when you've done the shoulder seams, you need to actually stitch your sleeves in. So with your notches, so notches are very important in garments. So these two notches indicate the back, so that's your back. That's your shoulder seam up there, and that's actually your front notch. So with the pins, make sure you start from the center, place on the edge, and just bear in mind it is jersey. So then you have the two notches. Oh, let me put this, I'll put the wrong thing there. Matching up. Place your notches together, the two backs, so the back of the t-shirt to the back of the sleeve. And allow, that would actually just stretch in place. And the same on the other side to the front. So please make sure that you do have a left and a right. I know with jersey it's quite hard to tell by the right and wrong side, but if you are working on something that's printed, that will come to effect. So just make sure that you do have them a left and a right with your pattern pieces. So join that together. And now, once I've done that, so this is the actual t-shirt. So this is the one that I pinned earlier. So making sure that you have a left and a right of the sleeve. And so what we're going to do is actually overlock our sleeve around the head of the sleeve. Make sure that when you are overlocking or when you are stitching, remove the pins, especially for those of you who have overlockers at home, because if you place a needle on there, it can actually break the blade, or the needle can actually be cut in half. You've got to be really careful with these machines. So switch that on, raise your foot, And now we're going to stitch these seams together. Matching up with all your notches. So just go nice and slow. Make sure that the shoulder seam is going towards the back of the garment. Go all the way around. So I think the seam allowance on your t-shirt's about 1.2. It's on your pattern piece. Always marking your notches, as I said earlier, very important. So keep going. So you've done, that's one sleeve, and you can actually see by the tension, if it's breaking, you have to check your machine, but that's all good. So it's all working quite well. So when you've done one sleeve, now you do the next sleeve. Same process, overlock together. And for those of you, as I mentioned with the domestic, you just straight stitch, ballpoint needle, and then zigzag the edges. With jersey and lycra or any, all the jersey fabrics, it doesn't fray. And jerseys do come in different weights, so you've got to bear in mind as well. Some are more slipperier than others. Go all the way around. So I'm just feeding that through, don't stretch your fabric. Keep going, and once you've done that, you've completed and overlocked both of your sleeves, which I'll lay that flat. So the next step that we're going to work to do is actually go from the sleeve all the way down to your side seam. That's the next step. So what we need to do is actually join the side seam into the sleeve as well. So with right sides together, matching up your sleeve seam, place a pin in there, the top of your sleeve. So we're going to overlock this as well. So everything is done on a 4-thread overlocker. Place a pin there. As I said, with the jersey, it likes to roll. So if you lay it on a flat bed, I usually place this, as you can see, on the machine. It just makes it easier for you to lay it flat and actually pin it down. Not pinning the whole garment, you're just pinning the actual side seam. So what we're going to do is overlock all the way from the top down to the bottom. So we're going to start. Oops, lost the shirt. Okay. Start from the sleeve, and you're going to feed that through. Making sure that all your seams match, especially the under seam. Do one side. So one side is complete. Cut off your loose threads. Then you're going to do the other side. So same process, start from the sleeve and go down to the hem of the t-shirt. Make sure everything's laid flat. As you can see, you all know that the blade sits on this side, so make sure your garment is away from the blade. You don't want to cut off your garment. So I'm just feeding that through, I'm not stretching it. Fits perfectly, matches, hence why notches are important. Keep going, cut the threads off. Now I'm just going to turn that inside out. So what you also need to do is at each stage, make sure you press your seams. Makes it easier towards the end of when you are finishing your garment, but that is pretty much the t-shirt once you've overlocked it. So the next couple of steps, we're going to take the sleeve hem and also the hem of the t-shirt. We're going to use the twin needle cover stitch machine. And the last one is we're going to place ribbing around the neckline. It doesn't matter which goes first. There's no order. You can do your neckline and then do the hemming last. So that's the t-shirt, and now I'm going to show you how to do the twin needle cover stitch on the sleeve and the hem. Okay, so when you've pressed your seams towards the back, what I've actually done is pinned 2 centimetres, that's your seam allowance on the hem of the t-shirt as well as your sleeves. I've actually transferred the pins to the right side of the fabric. Just bear in mind that with the twin needle cover stitch, you need to have the right side of the fabric facing up. So I'm going to stitch the actual hem first. I'll start roughly from the back. And there's a magnet there which indicates how, so it's 2 centimetres. I'm going to place, you can actually feel where the seam is on the seam edge. So I'm basically placing these 2 needles roughly in the centre of that seam, the hem. So I'm going to start, bear in mind, remember it doesn't have a back tack, but I'll show you what to do at the end. I've left the pins close to that seam edge, so I'm not actually stitching over the pin. You can take it as you go. So nice and slow, just feeding that through. So what it does at the back, it actually covers the hem. Nice and slow. So if you look at all your t-shirts that you're probably wearing, this is the machine that actually finishes the hem finish. So if you wanted to complete this seam finish at home with a domestic, what I suggest that you can actually do, you can do 2 rows of stitching on either side with a ballpoint needle. If you want, you can actually zigzag it in place. That's another way to actually finish off the seam edge. Keep going all the way around. And the seam. So make sure you do press your seam, your hem before you start. We're nearly there. And that's where we started. So what we're going to do is, because there's no back tack, where I started, I'm actually going to go about 4 or 5 stitches over those lines and heel back, and we'll cut off the thread. That will lock the stitching in place. So nice and slow, keep going, heel back, and that's the hem of the t-shirt. So what we did on the hem, we're going to do the hem of the sleeves. Same process. I would start from underneath. So try not to start too much on the seam junction. So raise your foot. 2 centimetres is the seam allowance as well. Go right around, nice and slow. But what I forgot to show you, and that's the actual inside of the t-shirt. So it actually covers the hem at the end. So that's your flat lock of the t-shirt. All the way around. Now, you can also do, before you actually join the side seams and also the sleeve seam on the inside, if you wanted to, you can always do this first before you close the side seam. So there's no really right or wrong. You're still going to get the same finish at the end of making a t-shirt. So that one. So it actually covers your whole flat lock on the inside. And then the next other sleeve, same process. Start from the bottom, guide it. Keep going. All the way around. Cut the threads off where you started. And same process as with the hem. Make sure we get about 4 or 5 stitches over. That will lock that in place. Cut the thread. And now, once you've done those steps, hem the sleeve and also the hem of the t-shirt. Give that a good press, and then we're going to do the actual ribbing around the neckline. Okay, so this is your ribbing. So the rib actually goes around the neckline of the t-shirt. So what you first need to do is fold it in half and overlock the seam edge. I know I'm doing it black on white. I'm doing this for a reason so you can actually see how the ribbing is set around in the neckline. So hence why it's in a contrast fabric. So what you need to do, you just overlock that seam edge. As I've been mentioning through the whole process, those of you who don't have an overlocker, you can zigzag that in place, or you can straight stitch that and actually press your seam allowance open. So what I'm going to do now that we've done that, I'm going to fold that in half and I'm going to press the ribbing with the iron to make sure that that's placed in half, and then I'm going to show you how to place it around the neckline. All right, so once you've actually gone and actually pressed this in half, what I've actually done is put a little notch on either side, so that can be indicate, so there's shoulder seams, a front seam, the center front, and also the back. So I put a little notch in there, and then I did fold that in half again, that notch matching up to the center back, did a little nick in there and a nick in there. They're going to become your anchor points to actually place around the neckline. So what I'm going to do, so it's going to be right sides together. I'm going to place the seam that we had to join to the center back notch, right sides together. Now if you want, this is just going to be overlocked. If you want, you can stay stitch this in place like with a straight stitch. That's your shoulder seam in there. Oops. They become your anchor points to your neckline. One in there, and all you need to do is actually stretch that in place, which fits beautifully. As I mentioned, you can straight stitch that before you overlock. And I'll just flip this over to make sure that the front matches around. So that notch is your center front. In there. Oops. And this, we're just gonna, that fits in there. all 3 layers. The ribbing is done in double. On the other side, making sure the seam edges match are in place. You do need to slightly stretch it to fit around the neckline. In there. Okay, so that is the neckline, the ribbing. So what we're going to do is overlock it, but as I mentioned, you can stay stitch that so it doesn't move. You've got 3 layers of fabric, and then you can zigzag the seam edge, those of you who don't have an overlocker. And then once I've overlocked, I'm going to show you how to use the twin needle as a finish, which is like the top stitching. So I'm going to start, sew this ribbing to the neckline. All 3 layers. I usually start from the back, the centre back of a garment, then the front. Feed that through, and you're going to slightly just stretch the neckline at just so the ribbing can fit on the front. Make sure your seam allowance is towards the back of the garment. Nice and slow. Just move out of the way so you can see it. Feed that through. Oops. Just make sure you don't put your garment underneath the overlocker. Take the pin out. So where you actually started, you're going to run the overlocker just a little bit and then go on the side. Turn the overlocker off, feed that through. Make sure you always trim your loose threads, especially making in a garment. So when I turn that through, hence why I did a contrast so you can actually see the ribbing. Give that a real nice press, steam the actual ribbing to the t-shirt, and when we've done that, we're going to actually twin needle around the neckline. Okay, I've pressed the ribbing nice and flat. As you can see, the seam allowance actually sits towards the garment. So now what we're going to do, here comes to the twin needle machine, cover stitch. So I'm going to start from the back, and I'm going to place, so we're going to do basically a top stitching thread. So we're going to start from the back, away from where the seam junction, where the centre back is. I'm placing 1 needle on the garment and 1 on the ribbing, and that's going to cover the stitch underneath. So feed that through. Nice and slow. I'm not pulling it. I'm feeding that all the way around. Go all the way around to where you start. Trim those. So you can take a look at the t-shirts that you've got. This is often the finish around the neckline, especially with the ribbing. Oh, and a jumper as well. Peel back. So once I've done that, there is, I know, the black thread, but just so you can actually see the contrast. So when you've done that, your t-shirt is complete. So there you go.